Welcome to the Digital Handshake Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Jorgensen, and I'm so pleased to be joined with Dr. John Paul Tutela of East Hanover, New Jersey. Welcome, Dr. Tutela.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, I've been really looking forward to this interview, if you will, for a few weeks now. It just so happens that you and I actually have a very close mutual friend. And that is the self-proclaimed king of cleavage, Dr. Sean Kalashati from Newport Beach, is one of my dear friends. And so I saw on your social media that you guys actually trained together.
Yes, fantastic. That's great to hear. Yeah, we trained together in the University of Louisville for plastic surgery residency. And I actually just finally made it out to California to go visit him. So we just had dinner maybe about a month ago.
So tell me this, if he's the self-proclaimed king of cleavage, what are you? What's your nickname?
The Maverick of Mommy Makeovers.
I love that. All right, fantastic. Well done. Well, both you and Sean continue to kill it in the sort of world of plastic surgery. Him on the West Coast, if you will, or you on the East Coast, and there in New Jersey, the sort of tri-state area. So tell me a little bit about your practice. I understand that you do, all things plastic surgery, both surgical, non-surgical, but love to just get a bit flavor of the practice.
Sure. Mostly what I do and specialize in is breast and body cosmetic surgery and breast cancer reconstruction. So I'm doing a lot of microsurgery for the breast cancer work, but most of who comes in to see me are cosmetic breast and body patients. A lot of those are, complex cases, revisional surgery, and things like that.
One of the things that I noticed on your website, and I found it very unique and quite clever, to be honest, is that you have a segment called the Tutela Bellas. Did I pronounce that correct?
Yeah.
Where you did a sort of patient testimonial vignettes of, I think it was like 6 or 7 women, different procedures, and they're actually did a photo shoot. They're in lingerie, and it's really showing their transformation and their excitement about the procedure with you. Tell me more about that, because I find that fascinating that you actually took the time to do that with your patients and then showcase that on your website.
Yeah, it was great, and actually one of the things I'm most proud of as far as, accomplishments within the practice. It really started as a vision that I had of, 5 or 6 or 7 of my patients kind of belly laughing on a billboard. I thought of, what it would take to actually make that come to light. And together with my wife, Nicole, who's got a background in advertising and creative direction, she really helped pull together, really a professional photo shoot. We got a stylist, their assistant, a fashion photographer, their assistant, a hairstylist, makeup artist, and just kind of picked, a few of my patients who I thought would meld well together, who all had like a, great attitude. Who wouldn't be shy in front of the camera. We sent them, gift cards to go get whatever lingerie they were, comfortable wearing, along with, a dress or something like that. And we just kind of put it together. And, originally it was just a photo shoot, an idea for like a billboard and to, use in advertising and social media. And then last minute conversation I had with a good friend of mine, Eli Heighton, who's in video production, actually just won an Emmy Award this year. He said, you should get somebody to just kind of film the whole process and, behind the scenes footage and things like that. So he sent over a phenomenal videographer. And we had the whole day, catered from breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and just had a blast. It was a long day, a very tiring day. So I definitely don't take for granted models and people that are involved in photo shoots and things like that. And everybody had a blast. And then, we got like highlight reels and then sent the patients, a microphone and asked to do a testimonial. And they just kind of voiced it over the highlights, and it came out great.
Well, I love the vision, and I'll tell you why. Here on the Digital Handshake, our mission is, how do we help plastic surgeons make that first digital, sort of marketing impression their strongest asset? And I felt like with the Tutela's Bellas concept is that, now with before and after photography, there's so much photoshopping that's going on, number one.
Yeah.
Number two is this whole concept of shadow banning, whether it's Google or Instagram or what have you, that, is feeling sort of this not allowing sort of nudity or before and afters to be shown. And it sort of really waters down, if you will, the ability to depict the result. And then I would say number three is, how do I really know that that's your patient, right?
Sure.
And so this concept of creating what I call patient journey vignettes, that what you built, is, I believe, the future of digital marketing within plastic surgery, because it created this ability for me to connect with those 7 or 8 women just by watching and listening to their stories, right? And that's what I loved about it. And I encourage our audience, for the plastic surgeons and those that watch our podcast, go check out Dr. Tutela's website and look at the Tutela's Bellas and what he did, because I really believe that that's the future of digital marketing within plastic surgery, and how to showcase your work and tell the stories of your, happy patients. Within those vignettes, there was something I picked up that I wanted to get your opinion on. And that is, one woman talked about obsessing. This is the word she used, obsessing about sort of her breasts, and how she was just so frustrated and disappointed, and sort of this self-esteem issue and what have you. And it became such this obsession for her. Talk to me more about the psychology of your patients when they come to you and you hear sort of these words they're using about how frustrated they are with their own bodies.
Yeah, sure. That happens a lot with my patients in particular, who are mothers, that they, look in the mirror and they've gotten to a point in their life, and they're been pregnant a few times, nursed a few babies, spent time child rearing, and a part of their life where, everybody else comes first. And they finally make it into the plastic surgeon's office. And finally, right now they are the front and center of the conversation. But they were used to, looking in the mirror and not even really recognizing the body they were looking at anymore. And for me, that's where, when I opened up a practice, something that was very new to me outside of training is being part of a patient's journey from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
How excited they are to be there, even in consultation, post-op, in looking at their results. And really just my day-to-day became, high fives and smiles all day. And I was like, this is the greatest job. I mean, I was at work all day and all we did was have fun. People are happy, to be part of that moment where they're kind of putting themselves first, and are so happy, even at the onset of the whole process, really has been really an honor and just an amazing thing that, was unexpected. Training, you're worried about your results and your technique and, your medical professionalism. But that moment where you become so involved in your patient's life and in such a happy moment in their life really has been such a gratifying part of opening practice.
Well, one of the things that I did notice about sort of your relationship that carries beyond just in the sort of within the operating room or in the practice is that sort of your relationship you have with the Jersey Shore TV show on MTV. And, it's a show that I kind of connect with when I was younger. And there was an episode I saw where you're talking with the cast and you guys were out to, I think, a lunch or dinner, and it was a kind of a funny moment. But, tell me how that came about, because that's an interesting connection where a plastic surgeon is so closely tied to this group of people in this show called Jersey Shore.
Yeah, it's been an amazing part of my journey, my career as well. I grew up, MTV was one of the biggest things ever. And then when the Jersey Shore came on, it was one of the last shows that I watched, as it aired, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I would get my wife, she was my girlfriend back then, and say, hey, it's on, it's starting, you gather around the TV at 8:00 or whenever. So it was really cool. And so Nicole, who, got referred to me through a relative of hers, who is a friend of mine, And so she was the first cast member to come on, and I took care of her. And, when we were kind of done, maybe the second week of post-op, she said, all right, what's your Instagram? I'll tag you. And I thought to myself, ooh, like I really need to like get my Instagram. Like I had no posts on it. I just
Right.
kind of made one,
Right.
when I first opened practice, but didn't pay much attention to it. But that's what really catapulted me deep into social media and connecting with an audience there, was that relationship. And then from her, other cast members came in and obviously took care of them well. And I'm, pretty casual relationship with all of my patients and staff, and, kind of just makes an easy connection.
So I also noticed, kind of through that story, you talked about how you built your Instagram following, and I mean, hats off, quite impressive. I think you're approaching almost 500,000 followers on
Yeah.
Instagram. I didn't have a chance to look at the other platforms as well, but how did you do it? Right? I mean, obviously the Jersey Shore, helped catapult you, but there's got to be a lot more to that story because, and the reason why I ask is, here on the Digital Handshake is trying to help plastic surgeons build that social media following because it's such a strong source of referrals and leads, if you will, for your plastic surgery practice if you know how to tap into that audience.
Sure. I would say it's definitely harder now than it was when I started. When I started, I was really one of the first plastic surgeons on the platform, certainly in New Jersey, where after a year or two of getting traction, people would come to me, other surgeons, they're like, "Oh, you're that guy that posts on social media and you post your pictures on Instagram of your patients." And I'm like, "Yeah." It helped to be an early adopter for
Yeah.
sure. And I think, something that, carries through probably in all industries is authenticity and being genuine. Obviously, getting in front of the camera is always going to be very beneficial so people could get to know you. That's something that I actually don't even do very well, is getting myself in front of the camera. But a lot of times just my stories, my point of view of my day from, family life, home life, social life, into the practice, kind of gave everybody a personal idea of who I was, the things that mattered to me. And I think definitely being genuine is what's going to get people to connect. They want to know a real person, get an idea of what it is to be part of that practice. And they're either, turned on by it and they want to come in, or, maybe not. But, today's day and age, it definitely has got to be just more difficult to start to gain traction because it's so saturated. But I think things like this, where you're able to connect with many people on different kind of platforms and in different ways, again, helps just make a real connection.
Right. And I'm wondering for you, given your large social media audience that you have, where are the guardrails, right? Like you mentioned that, if I was a plastic surgeon starting my practice today, it'd be really hard or much more difficult to gather a following versus, you perhaps that were on the forefront of it, years back. But, folks are trying to do like dancing in the OR. There's like all these like stupid gimmicky stuff and what
Yeah.
have you. And we all kind of, we could point to a couple examples. But I'd like to know for you in terms of how you manage and really try to push your social media, like, where do you focus?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, and you got to just kind of stay within the realm of being a physician,
Yeah.
being a doctor, making sure that that's the first thing you're doing. If somebody else has a camera and is filming, you have consent, that's fine. There are a lot of little gimmicky things. I never wanted to dance on camera, so I haven't done that yet. Some of my staff tries to get me to do it. They haven't won me over yet, but I think as long as you're taking care of patients, you're doing it in a safe way, and again that you're being authentic with who you are, so it doesn't look like you're crawling out of your skin, being forced to do something because it's a trend. Other things that we were trained in a board certified plastic surgeon way with before and afters and things like that. You never doctor a photo. You kind of just show what you show. Obviously, you're not going to pick your worst results and show it, but
Right.
you just kind of try to maintain those ethics and standards, in the workplace and online.
So with that is, you have, several high profile, or we'll say celebrity patients that you've treated throughout your career. And, you know, share with me a little bit about, is there a difference, for our audience, is there a difference when a plastic surgeon sits down with a celebrity or high profile individual versus just, the mom next door that's coming in for that makeover?
Yeah, I would say, the stakes just seem higher. I think there's just like a little bit more stress to deliver results. Certainly, depending on your personality, you may be starstruck in the console, and that's probably not going to go over great. So, I've just benefited from just having a casual, personality myself, that kind of translates to anybody that I meet. But definitely, you have that sense that the stakes are higher. And that could go with anybody who's not even necessarily a celebrity, but sometimes there's influencers that come in. They're going to do a video blog of their whole journey. So, then it's like one of those things where, before and after pictures, you have your after picture, which ones you want to show. You're going to show your better results. You started this, you don't necessarily know whether they've had a complication yet or anything like that. So, you're a little bit on more high alert, I would say. But other than that, the case itself, the surgery itself, if you're doing a lot of it, all becomes routine.
Well, I think to wrap up here, I want to say, a big thank you for being on the podcast with us. And really a final question is, you're doing a lot of things right. I mean, you've got an amazing website. You've got a tremendous social media following. I mean, from a digital marketing, plastic surgery, marketing standpoint, you're killing it, right? And 5 stars. If I'm a young plastic surgeon getting started, is there anything that you'd want to pass along and say, okay, here are some things that, I may have done that, obviously, we all make mistakes, but I'd just love to hear maybe any pearls or words of wisdom that you can pass along to our audience, because we are followed by a number of younger plastic surgeons and really trying to help them crack the code on how to better market.
Yeah, I would say just try to be available to do everything. I would tell my team early on, I would say more is more, as simple as that. So just try to get out in every different platform. And especially early on with marketing, I mean, there's the internet, Google Ads, Instagram, other social media platforms like TikTok. But even things like, a billboard or direct mail and things like that. And they're not all going to hit, but part of what you're building is brand awareness, and not every aspect of that has a return on investment that you could calculate, or even that would necessarily be worth it, as far as just like numbers go, as far as a return. But you're just starting to create a brand awareness. So being out there as a brand is important. And if there's an old adage in advertising that you needed to be like in 3 different places, radio, TV, and print, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So people are seeing you in different platforms, and then you become recognizable, and something hopefully is backed up with your results and your care and compassion, and then that right there is going to be a winning recipe for sure.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with our audience. And I want to say thank you again for being on the Digital Handshake Podcast, Dr. Tutela. An amazing guest. So tickled to have you on the show with us. And we want to thank our sponsors, Media PSC, for making this podcast available to you. And we'll see you on our next episode.
Thank you for having me.